why gifted and talented programs exist?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of different answers, and it's actually a topic that is hotly debated in some areas as well. If you look at the news around New York City, for example, they went in great shifts in terms of the gifted program in New York City because it has such a history of being inequitable and biased, particularly against low income families and families of color, so that there was a shift to say, we're just tossing the whole program. And now it's starting to be brought back in little pieces. And so the basic purpose of a gifted and talented program is to provide services for students who have learning needs beyond the scope of the regular curriculum. And so when we look at gifted and talented, what we would do is look at the definition of what this actually means. And one of the issues with gifted and talented is that there's actually no uh, legal mandate at the federal level. We do have a definition, but that's kind of it. So when we look at what some people kind of think of as the other end of the spectrum, I'm not a huge fan of that term, but when we look at something like special education, we have laws at the federal level that we have to follow, right? We don't at the federal level for gifted education. We do have a definition. And that is generally, students that have high capability and or have some kind of evidence of this high achievement that they're capable of in different areas. And so the federal definition does allow for different areas that are generally creative, artistic, academic, leadership, and in specific academic fields. And then the second important part of that is that they need services and activities that aren't provided by the typical curriculum in order to have their needs met. And so that is really the sort of the essential part of that definition, is not just that there are these special abilities, right? The potential for achievement, but that they need some kind of special program or services in order to have these abilities met. So why gifted and talented programs is essentially in order to have these special abilities or potential for abilities met. Now, depending on the definition, many, I don't know if I'd say many, but some state definitions will go on to say these talents exist across socioeconomic statuses, uh, racial or ethnic statuses, and so on, linguistic statuses. Not all state definitions have that added on.
Mm.
And so each state comes up with their own definition. Additionally, not all state definitions will have the where giftedness is. Not all states include it in arts. Not all states include it in leadership. Not all states include it in creativity or performance. Some just hold it to academic areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because while we have this federal definition, each state then comes up with what's our program, what's our definition, are we going to fund it? Are we going to identify and then not serve? What are we going to do? There's no consistency across the board. And so, at the heart of the matter of why, it's to provide services for students who need this extra push that's beyond the regular curriculum to meet their potential.
Okay. So I have to admit, when I first started teaching and I heard about gifted and talented, I legit thought the gifted and talented was for like the really intellectual, high IQ, all about academics.
Yeah.
And I later learned, no, you can actually have actual talent that will put you into this program as well. So, can you share a little bit more? Because I heard you mention it a couple times, like as far as the academic versus the actual talent side. We often, at least, again, a lot of conversations I've had is often about the academic side. But could you share a little bit more of what talents could look like within a gifted and talented program?
Yeah, absolutely. Creativity is a huge one. Creative thinking skills, looking at anything like that. And one of the most important measures of a great gifted program is what we call internal consistency. And that is the idea that what you are measuring in terms of your identification matches what your program is. So we could measure and say we're going to measure on creativity and use the Torrance test of creative thinking skills, for example, and use that to identify for our gifted program. But then, if once we get into the gifted program, all we do is give them acceleration in math and acceleration in language arts. And we don't actually provide anything in terms of creative exercises or creative talent development. What was the point of using that creativity measure to get into? If we're using a creativity measure for identification, we need to provide creativity in our gifted program and provide creative thinking exercises, ways to enhance our creativity. We need to provide advanced art classes and ways to really advance that. We need to provide advanced dramatics classes. We need to provide spontaneous activity. We need to provide the opportunity to really enrich those entrepreneurial activities, ways to put those creative thinking skills to use. So we need to provide extension in that. We need to provide ad lib classes. We need to provide humor classes. We need to provide an outlet for that to both allow students the opportunity to be creative and allow students to extend on their creative thinking skills and build upon them. And so there's a lot of these creativity and those visual arts talents. There's a lot of different realms that those could be in, but we need to offer programming that fits within those different realms in order to really extend on them. And some programs, some districts or some states really do. They offer gifted programs within visual arts, within drama, within music, and offer opportunities for students to be identified musically and then offer some kind of services as well so that they can have advanced challenge and really grow their talent in music and grow their talent in drama.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that because, like I said, I know before I didn't know that it was, I thought it was just, oh, you got to be really strong in math or something like that. And so you can get into the program. But yeah, there's actual talent. So like the visual arts and I think you said drama, those kind of things can be included in those gifted programs. So I want to shift gears just a little bit because we've established, why they exist and what it can gifted and talented programs look like. But I want to know what are some of the challenges that you're seeing when it comes to, I don't know, maybe entry, maybe even retention. What are some
Mhm.
areas that you're seeing some challenges there?
Yeah. And I will say, back to that other topic really quickly, that that is a lot more rare. It's not
Mhm.
as common to have creativity in the arts and dramatics. So it is more common to have what you think of in terms of that academic aptitude as far as the gifted programs.
Okay.
They do exist. But challenges, honestly, equity, representation,
Mhm.
underrepresentation, students missing that should be there. That's the biggest challenge that we face in gifted education that I see. And what that boils down to is a lot of what I'll be honest, I'm only up to chapter 2, but a lot of what I've read in your book. And that's that bias, that implicit bias that we're not recognizing, that we're not seeing. It's not enough disruptors, as we see on your chart, not enough disruptors that are taking a stand and recognizing what students need. And so what we see is that students of color are not being recognized. And when they are recognized, getting to your second question in terms of issues of retention, they're not being supported in the gifted programming. And so they're either being phased out or they're choosing not to stay within the program.
The challenge that I hear a lot is the gifted and talented programs are often kind of like gatekeepers because usually you need a teacher or somebody to refer children to these programs, and unfortunately, um, a lot of our kids of color, for example, aren't being, um, I guess, recommended to these programs. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Absolutely. It's not always that the teacher is the gatekeeper, but
Okay.
that is a frequent issue. And so some schools have moved to what's called universal screening, where
Mhm.
all students, let's say in third grade, will receive the same test. That's one solution for the teacher as gatekeeper issue, because then instead of a teacher saying, I think students X, Y, and Z should get the test and should be nominated, and only those children get the test, having universal screening knocks that out. And so, as more districts move to that option, it eliminates one part of that issue. Now, what still happens is step two are the teacher recommendations.
Mm.
So, it's still a part of it. It's just it eliminates them from being that first step. But what they're still sometimes included. And so instead of being the initial gatekeeper, they're still a factor.
So the
And so,
universal, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Well, so I haven't heard about the universal